Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number 206, recorded live Monday, July 7th, 2014. I am your host and shark attack survivor, Todd Klindt, and I will be your host, your guide for this evening's show. Before we get started, though, I want to give a shout-out to my friends at Rackspace. This time we spend together is every week-ish that we get together and have this time. We couldn't do this without Rackspace. They helped me out immensely. And so you can give me a little back by going to sharepoint.rackspace.com. Fire up a browser. Doesn't matter which browser. Whatever your favorite browser is, whatever your least favorite browser is, doesn't matter. Fire it up. Point your browser at sharepoint.rackspace.com. See what they got going on out there. There's video games, things like that. There's white papers and videos and Easter eggs, all kinds of great stuff. Something for everybody out at sharepoint.rackspace.com. Go on out there. Tell them I sent you. All right, for production notes, I got 205 done pretty quickly. But I kind of paused it because I didn't do 204 until I got back from vacation. So 205 was really done Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon-ish, but I still had to blog 204 and let it set out there and let it percolate a little bit like that. So that's why 205 came out. Hopefully 206 will come out quickly as well. That's the one tonight. I kind of got a rhythm if I let myself get into it. But that all went pretty well. So hopefully next week will be good too. And now we'll go on to the topics, the reason you're all here, the topics. So first off, kind of a production note, kind of a topic. Next week I am going to be in Australia. I'm looking in the chat room, looking at my buddy Bruce and John Liu. They're both out there in the Southeast Asia Pacific area general place. I'm an American, not great with geography, but I'm going to be out there, and so while I'm recording this Monday night at 8:30 in Sydney right now, it's actually like noon on Tuesday, so they're actually in the future. They can tell you how much tonight's netcast sucked ahead of time. But I don't know, I don't know what my responsibilities are going to be at the conference. I don't know if I'm going to be able to be online or any of that kind of stuff. So I will not be recording next week's netcast. I've talked to Shane to see if he can fill in for me, and he doesn't know because next week is also the Microsoft Worldwide Partner Conference, and he will be there. So we don't know if there will be a netcast next week or not. But in 2 weeks, on July 21st, while I will be in New Zealand that day, also weird timings and all that, Shane will be back in Cincinnati. So he is definitely going to be doing a netcast July 21st, but not we don't know about next week. But follow me on Twitter. We'll find all that out. So that made me think of something. Normally I tweet these things out from my account, my @ToddKlindt account. But I was thinking, since Shane's been pitching in and doing some stuff, do I need a Netcast only Twitter account? Do I need a Todd Klindt Netcast, @ToddKlindt Netcast, that I can tweet out things like I'm going on and all that? I question how helpful that will be, because I know that even if I have a Netcast specific Twitter account, I'm still going to tweet it all out from my regular account. So anybody who follows both will get bombarded by both of them. But it just gave, because I would never give Shane my actual Twitter account, but I would give him, this Netcast only account to tweet from when I'm gone, taking vacation, things like that. So let me know what you think about that, setting up a Netcast-specific Twitter handle just for Netcast-specific things. So Doug Hemiger in the chat room just shouted yes. I wasn't sure what the context was. Maybe his favorite team scored a goal, or who knows. There are all kinds of inappropriate ideas. But then he clarified it that he thinks that there should be a Netcast-specific Twitter account. So that's good. Yes, Merrill in the chat room is asking if he can heckle that. Absolutely, by all means. So Johnny is saying that we probably don't need one. So we'll see. We'll get some feedback. You can always send me feedback at Todd Klindt on Twitter or email me. So if you have an opinion about whether I should set up a specific Twitter account for this, give me a shout. But again, next week there will probably not be a Netcast. The week after that there will be, but it will be Sean, or it will be Shane. So, okay, the next topic, and this is kind of, I hesitated to even bring this up because it seems very, it just seems not cool. But July 1st, that was a week ago. No, a little less than a week ago, 6 days ago. July 1st is my MVP renewal anniversary. So to kind of get you up to speed on that, Microsoft has an MVP program, and that is something that they use to reward people that help people with Microsoft products, you know, in forums and chat rooms and blogs and all that kind of stuff. And I have been fortunate enough since 2006 to be a SharePoint MVP. I've got a bunch of awards and stuff. They send you a little box every year with a plaque and all that kind of stuff. But my renewal date for that is July 1st. So once a quarter. So obviously January, April, blah, blah, blah. You have to be renewed. So when you're an MVP, you're only an MVP for a year. So you have to keep earning it. You can't just glide. So my renewal date was July 1st, and I did get renewed. So this was my 9th year being renewed as an MVP. So that it kind of sounds like bragging. It kind of sounds whatever, but people have asked, and so I thought I would bring it up. So I would like to thank all of you folks that you know listen to the Netcast and read my blog and come to my sessions at conferences and all that kind of stuff, because I couldn't do this without you. I got to have an audience and all that, and so thanks to all of you that do that. You keep me motivated, you keep me encouraged, and all that. And so thanks for that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and there's some MVPs in the chat room, so I feel the need to clarify this. Being an MVP is not Microsoft's way of saying this person is very smart, because clearly I've been an MVP for 9 years, so that clearly can't be the case. But when you see somebody who's an MVP, you know that they're helpful. You know that you can ask them questions. You know that they're going to be friendly. And that's really the thing that the MVP program means. It doesn't necessarily mean they're smart, though there are several smart MVPs, but it means they've got big mouths. They're willing to help. They're willing to answer questions, things like that. So if you see that in somebody's signature, you see it on their Twitter account that they're an MVP, that's what that means. If you've got questions, those are the folks to go to. So again, I mean, it kind of feels like bragging, but I did want to bring it up. Because I have had people ask, but yes, I did get renewed, 9th year running. So now the pressure's on. Now I gotta hit 10. I gotta get 10 in a row. So we'll do some stuff. So somebody in the chat room, Mark Chrisman, brought up the TechSmith stuff. So that is an interesting thing. There are other companies that recognize that MVPs are MVPs because they have big mouths, and so there are other companies that give MVPs stuff, because they know that while these people promote Microsoft products, they may promote other products. And I would like to take this opportunity, because Mark brought it up first, is that TechSmith is one of those companies. So TechSmith makes the Snagit software and the Camtasia software, and I use both of them. So I use Camtasia to edit and render this Netcast and every video that I ever do. So I'm preparing my demos for Australia right now, the Australian conference, and I'm using Camtasia for that, slicing and dicing and all that kind of stuff. So while I'm fortunate that I don't have to pay for them, if for whatever reason my MVP status went away and I had to start paying for Snagit, which is screenshot software, or Camtasia, I would absolutely do it in a heartbeat. Having used them now for however many years, they are fantastic pieces of software. So I'd like to give a shout out to TechSmith for one, because number one, they don't have to do this. They don't have to give me anything. They don't owe me anything, but they do. And number two, they are super helpful folks. If you see the TechSmith booth at like TechEd or SharePoint Conference or whatever, they're always answering questions. They're always being very helpful. They've always got really knowledgeable people there. Every year I go up to them with all of my gripes about Camtasia and Snagit, and then every year they tell me how I can do all the things that I was complaining that I couldn't do. So thanks go out to those guys. The other company that I probably use the most is VMware. VMware also gives free copies of VMware Workstation to MVPs. And if you've ever seen me present at a conference, I always use VMware, and so that's been a great savings for me. So that is one of the great benefits of being an MVP. And again, this isn't a bragging thing, but I wanted to be upfront because I talk about Snagit and Camtasia all the time, and I just want to be upfront that I'm using a promotional copy. Okay, enough with all that crap. We've talked about me enough. Let's move on. I'm all embarrassed. I'm blushing. My cheeks are getting hot. So both Trevor Seward and Lori Gowan in the chat room are talking about Hyper-V. Absolutely, probably will switch over to Hyper-V before Windows. I'm going to say Windows 8.1, honestly, but before Windows 8, there was no way to virtualize 64-bit things with Microsoft software on laptops. Yes, I could install Windows Server on my laptop. Anybody who has installed Windows Server on their laptop can attest that it is a craptacular experience. I did it myself for quite a while. It just doesn't work very well because I tried to do that so I could use Hyper-V. But then when SharePoint went all 64-bit, Virtual PC was all 32-bit, and so I couldn't use it for there. That's kind of how I got in VMware Workstation. But now that Windows 8 came out, I didn't switch to Windows 8 because Windows 8 itself was not that compelling. But now that Windows 8.1 is out, the Hyper-V stuff is in there. I will probably give Hyper-V another shot. Doug is talking about he switched all his stuff to Azure and moved all his VMs there. With Rackspace, I have a cloud server account, so I can spin up as many cloud servers as I want, so I could certainly do that. The problem becomes the time that I need this stuff the most is conferences. And anybody who's ever been to a conference or a hotel can attest that the internet connection there stinks. So I can't ever trust that. So I'm going down to Australia and New Zealand next week. I'm presenting 2 sessions at each of those conferences, and I am pre-recording all of my demos because I'm not taking my laptop with me. I'm only taking my Surface, and I can't virtualize SharePoint on a box with 8 gig of RAM. But I could have all the stuff in the cloud, and honestly I will, so that I have some flexibility with my demos, but I can't depend on it. I can't be sure that that's going to be there. So I pre-record my demos now. And that's good and bad. It feels like cheating when I pre-record my demos. It feels like the old cooking shows where they pull stuff out and you never get to actually see it all. But the good news about that is it makes me practice all my demos up front, makes me do them ahead of time, which is good. And also it allows me to trim some stuff out. It allows me to tighten them up a little bit. It also allows me to make demos of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have time to do during the session. So I kind of feel like overall it's a good thing. But the Azure stuff, and the other thing is, yeah, Azure's expensive. So Bruce Albany is saying it feels a little bit like lip syncing. I don't disagree. So I will say that I resisted doing that for a long time. The first time I pre-recorded a demo was last year for the SharePoint Exchange Forum in Stockholm, and that took place on a cruise ship, so the internet connection stuff was completely out. But one of the sessions that I did was a 60-minute session on installing SharePoint. We all know you can't install SharePoint in 60 minutes. Yeah, 60-minute session. So I talked to the organizer, Joran Huseman, and I said, hey, I got this dumb idea, and man, feel free to tell me it's dumb if you don't like it, but I kind of want to pre-record the installation demos so that I can tighten up all of the waiting things and take all the pauses and stuff out so that I can actually fit it all in and talk about it while it's happening. But it's gonna be this lip syncing thing. It's gonna be phony. And he's like, go ahead and do it. I trust that you know what you're doing. If anybody asks you questions, you'll be able to answer them, so you'll be in good shape. And I did it. And before I started the session, I told everybody, if anybody has any problems with me using pre-recorded demos, by all means tell me. I'm looking for feedback. 0 complaints. Everybody loved it or was indifferent. And so that's kind of what makes me kind of think it's going to be okay. And we got a guy from New Zealand, Chris from New Zealand, is confirming that the internet is terrible at the New Zealand SharePoint conference. I hear they have to import it all. I hear it's all so that's why I'm doing that. So anyway, I've labored upon that point too much. Wanted to go on, so I had to edit a blog post this week. Had to go back and change my work. I've been the whole Service Pack 1 debacle with SharePoint 2013, I've tried to stay on top of that. I've tried to keep that stuff as clear and concise as I could. And last week I found that there was a kind of a gap in my guidance. So one of my blog posts that I had was one that lets you know which version of Service Pack 1 you have installed on your farm. And then that's important because if you have the first version of Service Pack 1 installed, you can't install any updates. And you want to know that before you try to install any updates. If you have the second version of Service Pack 1 installed, then you can install updates. But they both give the same farm version number, so there's no quick, easy way. So I had this blog post that gives you screenshots and shows you that if you have the first Service Pack 1, it shows you, the build number and all that kind of stuff, and it shows you the KB article from the Service Pack. If you have the second Service Pack 1, it has all that, but then it has another line that has the newer version, the newer KB article. What I didn't have is what happens if you installed SharePoint from the MSDN or volume license media, because that's another scenario you might find yourself in. And so this came up at Rackspace. We had some customers that were doing that. So I cranked open a VM that I had that had been installed that way, and sure enough, it looks a third way. It looks completely different. It has the same build number as the original Service Pack 1, but since there was no KB installed, there was no patch installed, there's no KB. So I had to go back and edit that blog post on how to tell which version of Service Pack 1 you have installed on your media or on your server. So that's a good little thing, and I like to thank the guys at Rackspace for bringing that up so I could get that blog post a little more concise. Another interesting thing that I discovered last week or around the same time was if you have a farm that was installed with RTM, patched to Service Pack 1, the good one or the bad one, and then patched again so that everything is good to go. You've got Service Pack 1, the good Service Pack 1. And let's say you need to add another server to your farm. And let's say your corporate standard now is Windows 2012 R2 servers. That's pretty standard. It's been out for a while now. The only way you can install SharePoint on Windows Server 2012 R2 is to use that volume license or MSDN media with Service Pack 1 installed or integrated. And the reason for that is because not only is Service Pack 1 integrated in that, but the prerequisite installer has also been changed to match what Windows Server 2012 R2 does. So you do that. You install your Windows Server 2012 R2. You crack out your MSDN ISO. You blow the dust off. Pop it in the CD drive. You install SharePoint Service Pack 1. Now, you would think it would be as simple as just firing up the configuration wizard. They're both at Service Pack 1, right? Next, finish, and off you go. But it's not that simple. So while the farm service number matches the service number of your installation, if you try to add a machine that was installed with the MSDN or volume license ISO, you cannot add it to a Service Pack 1 farm. You'll get a version mismatch. So what you need to do then, silly as it sounds, is you need to install Service Pack 1 on top of your fresh server that has Service Pack 1 integrated, because that second Service Pack 1 fiddles some bits and it's different enough that the machine looks like it's not got the right patches on it. So if you're going to be installing new SharePoint 2013 servers, I encourage you to use Windows Server 2012 R2, but just know that you're going to have that extra step where you install Service Pack 1 on top of your server that already has Service Pack 1. Did not necessarily see that coming when all the Service Pack 1 tomfoolery came out, but it's good. I did confirm that is how that behaves, and that probably looks like something I need to blog, get that out there. So hopefully here, within a couple of months, maybe 6 months, we'll have another CU out. We can get that on there, and all this Service Pack 1 stuff will be gone and forgotten. Just something that we'll sit around at SharePoint conferences about and laugh and laugh. Oh, the memories. Speaking of patching, have gotten this question in my blog comments a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. First off, let me apologize. I've got a bunch of blog comments I got behind. For whatever reason, I think it was May, I ended up getting just a ton of comments on my blog, and I didn't get caught up. But I've been trying to I'm trying to stay current, trying to work through my backlog of comments. And I got a bunch of comments specifically around the June 2014 CU for SharePoint 2013. And the problem is people are installing this patch, and then they're looking at my list of patches, and their farm build number doesn't match the build number that I say they should have. So they all get in a tizzy and run around, and I don't blame them. That's kind of what that list is for. So here's the scoop. When it comes to build numbers, patch numbers, whatever you want to call them, there are a lot to choose from. And it seems with the last couple of patches for SharePoint 2013, Service Pack 1, and this June cumulative update, the SharePoint team has gotten kind of fast and loose with the farm build number. Excuse me. So I say this for a couple of reasons. Service Pack 1 that is bad and Service Pack 1 that is good have the same farm build number. That kind of stinks. So the only way that you can tell which one you've got installed is to look at individual components, which also have their own build number. So I'm sure they had a good reason for it, but it's kind of a pain for us. The June cumulative update has a similar issue where the patch has one build number, but the farm has a different build number. And there's a couple of ways to get the patch build number. One of the ways is if you go to the download page for the patch and you've got the files across the bottom, you can click a little link that says, more information or something like that, and it will give you the build number that's in there. Or if you download the executables and things like that, you can look at the build numbers in there. But just because the patch is at a specific build number doesn't mean that the farm is going to rev to that same build number. And for a couple of these patches, what has happened is I've looked at the build number that the patch had. I've added that build number to my table, but then for whatever reason that Microsoft decided, when you install that patch and apply it to your farm, the farm doesn't get that same build number. And so I'm going to have to be a little more careful about that. But don't get freaked out if this happens. So I can confirm on my own farms is this way, and I need to go back and edit my list. If the patch build number and the farm build number don't completely jive, not always a big deal. But if you want to be super secure about what's going on, make sure that you've run the config wizard on all of your boxes. Make sure, and if you get any failures with that, especially with this June one, I've had to do this a couple of times. Instead of running the config wizard, the UI, which is psconfigui.exe, but you can also run psconfig from the command line. So I've had a couple of farms with this June cumulative update where I've had to go out and run PowerShell as sp install and run psconfig force blah, and that does the same thing as the psconfig UI, and so that will button it up. And then if you're really concerned, you can go to your upgrade page in Central Admin. If something's not been upgraded correctly, it'll show up in there. Also, you can do the STS-ADM local upgrade status. I think the operation name is, I should have that in my notes, but I don't. That will also tell you if there's anything funky with your farm. So I apologize. I do need to update that page to make that thing match reality a little bit, but don't always fret if things don't match exactly. All right. So that reminds me of another thing. I'm going to move a couple of things in my notes here. Bloop. So speaking of me updating my pages and all that kind of stuff, as you know, for both SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013, I've maintained these patch pages. And for both of those, so you've got toddklindt.com/sp2010builds and toddklindt.com/sp2013builds. And had a customer a couple of years ago say, this is great, but I don't want to go to your blog every day and check and see if there's a thing there. So I created Twitter accounts at sp2010 patches and at sp2013 patches that you can follow. And anytime I change anything, or add a patch, or add a regression, or add a note, or whatever, I tweet it out from there. So you can, if you don't want to follow me, or my crap gets in there and you can't see it, you can follow those Twitter accounts. And so that's one way to find out what's going on. But in the case like this June thing where I'm going to have to go back and play with those build numbers a little bit, I'm going to tweet it. And I try not to tweet that kind of stuff in off business hours because I know how everybody is. You got your Twitter stream, you get up, go to work in the morning, and anything that's been tweeted in like the last 10 hours, you're probably not going to see. That's certainly how it is for me. So I try not to tweet at that time, but everybody's got different times. So one of the things I've been playing with lately, and I've talked about it on here a couple of times, are these websites that will detect changes to another website and then email you or do whatever. And so I've been using one of those to track changes on my own website just to kind of see how that all works. So the one that I've been using, there are many. The one that I've been using is changedetection.com. You go to changedetection.com, you create an account, and then you just give it pages to watch, and you tell it how frequently you want to be updated, what kind of changes you want to be updated about, things like that. And when a watched page changes, then changedetection.com sends you an email, does whatever. So what I have done is I have followed my SharePoint 2013 patch, the blog post, and then I picked a couple of individual patches that I'm following those pages, and then I've gone through and changed those pages to see what happened. Then it seems to catch it. It seems to work exactly the way that you would think that it would. So if your workflow is that you don't want to check my blog post every day, and Lord knows I don't blame you, or you don't do Twitter, or you get you get lost and all that, another option that you can have is do this changedetection.com and follow those pages, and then when I change them, you'll get an email to your inbox. Works pretty well. So the other place that you can use that is I talked about earlier in the Netcast how I had Netcast 205 done, but I hadn't tweeted and blogged and all that yet. There are a couple of ways you can get those early. Number one, so when I render these things out, the very first thing that I do is I render out the MP3 file because there's nothing to do. I drag the video that I'm recording here, I drag it in Camtasia, fix the audio so that it's compressed and all that kind of stuff. Render audio, it spits it out into a file, and then I run a PowerShell script that puts all the MP3 tag information in and uploads it to the web. So that is the thing. But then I don't always update the RSS right away, especially like the 204 thing. So there is a page, if you wanted to, you could follow, and it would let you know as soon as I uploaded any Netcast files. You can go to media.toddklindt.com/netcast, and that's where all the files are at. So the RSS feed that I populate points there. Things like that. So if you had been following that, you would have known Tuesday immediately when Netcast 205 went up. Also, if you want the video stuff, if you prefer that, I've got a YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com/ToddKlindtNetcast. You can follow me on there, and then you would have known because I have that set up there too. So I upload those right away. So that's the first place the video goes. So I do the audio. It goes up there. I go back. I add the lower thirds. I do, I fix the title screens and all that kind of stuff. I render it out and I upload it to YouTube. That's the second place. So yes, Lori in the chat room is mentioning she's trying to smooth things over. She's saying that she does remind him she is pretty good about that. If I get behind, she does keep me on my toes. So just a couple things, but I do like the change detection site. There's a lot of great tools for that. Speaking of SharePoint and speaking of online, one of the sessions that I'm doing for the Australian SharePoint Conference and the New Zealand SharePoint Conference is how to manage SharePoint Online with PowerShell. And this was kind of an interesting story. I talked to the folks that run the Share the Point conferences, those conferences down in Australia. I talked to them 6-8 months ago, something like that. Debbie Ireland and Mark Rhodes were the people, and I emailed them and said, hey, I had a great time down in Sydney last year. I didn't do the New Zealand conference last year, but I did do Sydney. I said, I had a great time. I would love to do it again. So you guys just let me know whatever you want, and I will say yes to it, and that's what I will do. And so Mark had heard about my Visual Studio load balancing thing, and so he said that one. And the other one that he said was, They're getting a lot of interest on SharePoint Online with his customers, and he's a PowerShell guy, so he always wants there to be more PowerShell. So he asked me to do a session on SharePoint Online PowerShell, using PowerShell with SharePoint Online. I'm like, absolutely, sure, I'll do whatever. Tell me to stand on one foot and bark like a dog, that's fine, I'll do it. Had a great time, want to get back. So I started working on my sessions, and I, doing my demos, things like that. Kind of got that out, started working on the SharePoint Online with PowerShell session, and discovered something. So my sessions down there, I believe, are 60 minutes. Probably 60, maybe 75, but probably 60. And so I started looking at the SharePoint Online PowerShell stuff, and there wasn't 60 minutes worth of stuff to talk about. There was more like 10 minutes worth of stuff to talk about. For SharePoint Online, there are 30 commandlets total. So you download the SharePoint Online PowerShell module and load it up. 30 commandlets. That's not exaggeration. That's actually how many there are. And 2 of those are for connecting and disconnecting. So now you're down to 28 that are actually SharePoint. And the bulk of the SharePoint commandlets for SharePoint Online are just gets. And you really don't even get the whole object. And you get a copy of the object. You don't get an instance of it, so you really can't do much. You can't change much. And so I told Mark, I'm like, I got a 60-minute session. I've got like 10 minutes worth of material on this, and I'm fine with that. I'm happy letting everybody go 50 minutes early, or we could sit around and, eat candy bars and talk about how funny my accent is. I don't care. But so I'm going to end up adding some other PowerShell stuff and adding some SharePoint on-prem stuff, but I'm going to get the online stuff first. But I guess the reason I bring it up in the Netcast is, number one, if you've got SharePoint Online with Office 365, by all means, go download the module. It's really easy to install, especially if you've got Windows 8 or Windows 8.1. It's just next, finish, and then you can connect. But you can't do much with it but poke around with it. It's going to get better. I mean, it's got no way to go but up, and just get familiar with it, because you can do things like create site collections, change quotas, stuff like that, things that I imagine admins do with SharePoint Online, and everything's cooler when you do it with PowerShell. So if you haven't already done it, go download those things. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, come to my session. Do that. And so I kind of want to bring that up. And I brought up another thing. So last week I talked about how I had some free passes to give away to those conferences. I was hoping to draw the names tonight, but haven't gotten a lot of interest in that. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand and you want to go to the SharePoint conference down there but don't have a pass, email me or tweet me, let me know, and within the next couple of days I'll decide who I can give those to. But I would love to have you go. They would love to have you there. They gave us speakers this incredibly generous offer of being able to send somebody for free. I would love to send somebody for free. You got to let me know. All right. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and this has come up a couple of times, but I saw a bunch of tweets about it today. It looks like they've added it. Oh my God, that's an ugly URL too. So Microsoft has lately been doing a great job of putting out a lot of free books on everything. All kinds of stuff, Windows and SharePoint and Office and Exchange and all that kind of stuff. And they have recently added more. So they're saying it's the largest collection of free Microsoft books everywhere. I would say that when my last book came out, I went to some of the pirate sites out there. There were some big, awfully big collections of free ebooks out there. But anyway, Microsoft's got these out there. They're for free. You can download them with a clear conscience, and they come in all kinds of different varieties. So you can download for whatever type of reader you have. I get the Mobi versions, I believe, for my Kindle. And they work like a champ. If you have a Kindle, and I have an actual Kindle, if you add them to your Kindle account, then they'll do the syncing thing across Kindles and all that. But everything you can think of, I just want to download them all. It's great fun. So if you've been looking to get up on some technology and all that, go out to that link. And that's on blogs.msdn.com/b/ms-small-biz, and then a whole really long crud at the end. So good stuff. Glad to see all that information out there. Now we're on to the final bit of the Netcast, the home stretch, folks. We are almost done. Almost done. We are now at everybody's favorite portion, the shameless self-promotion portion. As I have alluded to earlier in the Netcast tonight, Friday I'm flying to Australia, and I will be speaking at the Australian SharePoint Conference, July 15th through the 16th. And I'll be doing a session on load testing with Visual Studio, and then a session on SharePoint Online with PowerShell. So those will be good sessions. And then I also told Mark Rhodes, kind of running the thing, him and Debbie Ireland, said whatever else you want me there for, I will do it. Last year they had some kind of game show that I took part in, and I won. So all kinds of stuff. I'm going to be at just running around, just annoying people. If you're at either of these conferences, and any conference, honestly, but any conference, come up and find me. Say hey, shake my hand. Don't be shy, for goodness sakes. I sit around just looking for people to talk to. So come up and say hey if you're going to be at any of these conferences. That's next week. The week after that, I will be in Auckland, New Zealand at the New Zealand SharePoint Conference, and the same sessions, the load testing with Visual Studio session and the SharePoint Online session, and that's the 22nd and 23rd. And then in September 16th through the 19th, I will be at SP TechCon in Boston. I will be doing sessions on upgrading to SharePoint 2013, PowerShell, and just, I guess, like an admin session. Shannon and I just sharing our admin tricks, just doing the thing, all that. And then in September, about 10 days later, I'll be flying to Stockholm, Sweden, once again for the SharePoint Exchange Forum. That is September 29th and 30th. And it looks like I will be doing my load testing session there as well. Getting a lot of mileage out of that one. Holy cow. And my upgrade session. So, but yeah, as always, if you see me at any of these conferences, goodness sake, come up and say, hey, I would love it if you did. Be great. So for those in the chat room, I apologize for all the technical difficulties we had tonight. Holy cow, only had to reboot like 30 bazillion times before this we all got straightened out, but I think we're good now. We got the lights, we got the sound, we got the audio. So thanks to everybody in the chat room for your patience. Again, probably not going to be a Netcast next week, but stay tuned to the Twitter and all that. And I'll be online next week, so if you're not sure, you can send me a tweet. I should be around when all that's going on. But then the next week you will have one. On the 21st, it will be a pale impression. It will be disappointing from start to finish, but Shane Young will be guest hosting on the 21st. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again to the people in the chat room. Thanks to everybody else. You all have a good night, and I will see you in 3 weeks. 3 weeks from now, I'll be back. See you then. Have a good night.